And hello and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Jacob right here on YouTube. And my guest today is John Milor. John, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Well, absolutely. And now for people who don't know who you are, can you give us a background?
Okay, I'm an author and probably most known for my research done in the field of Christian ufology, which is a certain flavor of ancient astronaut research that it has a Christian worldview. So I include things that they don't commonly talk about on shows like Ancient Aliens, like uh, the fact that it's connected to prophecy, the existence of ET life, and where we're going with that. I get more into why the beings are coming here from a Christian perspective. Um, why, good guys, bad guys, um, detailing about where I think it's going, and prophecies that the Bible specifically talks about, um, which I believe that that's how I interpret it. And it's for Christians and non-Christians because, like, for Christians, I have a specific message of like, here's things that are in the Bible that you maybe look past it. Colossians first chapter 1:20, verse 20, for example, talks about the work that Jesus did on the cross is to reconcile all of us here on earth, but also all things in the heavens. And a lot of people read past that and they're like, wait a second, heaven? What's in heaven that needs reconciliation with God? Um, well, it's the word heaven is this huge misconception in the Bible. It's a plural word in every instance. So, and it's outer space. So it's also got a dimensional aspect to it, but it's basically our multidimensional cosmos. The Bible's been talking about this the whole time. Uh, they don't a lot of Christians don't think of heaven that way. They take heaven and they put it over in this other not part of this reality category, and that's not how it was written, and that's not how they understood it in the early church. Um, it's the sky. You look up, you see the heavens. They're talking about the heavens where angels live, and otherworldly beings come from the heavens. That's why the word star is synonymous with angels in multiple scriptures because they come from the stars. So I talk about things like that to Christians, but I also to people who don't have any religious context or whatever. I like to point out prophecies and the fact that I've made predictions in the past and they just seem to be going in that direction. Um, the Bible talks about artificial intelligence, for example. And so I mentioned over 20 years ago in some of my earlier writings talking about AI and where it's going. Um, I have predictions that still haven't happened yet, but I know that they're going to because the Bible talks about it. So this kind of gives my research an edge because they have all these speculations and they can look at ancient writings and stuff and then talk about, oh, well, ETs, they want to come here because they want to harvest humans and eat us like food. We're cattle to them or whatever. That was the grand finale to the X-Files, if you didn't remember back then. Um, or they have all these different theories, um, but the Bible actually is very clear on both spectrums. Like, here's what the good guys are doing. Here's what they did in the past. Here's what they're going to do in the future. Here's what the bad guys did in the past. Almost destroyed the planet. God came back and trashed them with the, flood of Noah. Sort of just sledgehammer, bam, start over again. And Jesus said we're going to return to the days of Noah. So that's a prophecy basically indicating strong indication that we're going to have public disclosure. And otherworldly beings are going to integrate with our society, just like that old 80s show V, if you can remember that show. Uh, I believe we're going to be looking at something like that in the future. But certain things have to happen first. So that's why I think, my research has two prongs to it, for Christian audience, for non-Christian audience. It kind of spans the gambit. And I I refer to things in a scientific way, but also in a theological way. I connect science and theology. I connect the spiritual and the physical. I see them as synonymous in a lot of ways. Um, so that's basically the biggest part of my writing. I do write about other things. I got a children's book, a fantasy book, and stuff like that too,
Now,
though.
what is your description of a UFO? Because people has their own description of one, and what is your description?
Well, the the generic term UFO is just something you can't identify,
Yeah.
you know. But I get into this with Christians about, they have a hard time thinking of angels as ETs. It's like, no, angels are not biological, like, well, who said? If they're able to reproduce with humans and have children, hybrid children, that sounds biological to me. Uh, but they fly in chariots. The Bible refers to angelic chariots, and the Bible even has straight up abductions documented. 2 Kings 2:11, Elijah was walking along with his friend Elijah, and these angels showed up and hit him with a tractor beam, sucked him up into their angelic chariot, and off to heaven they went. And they never saw him again. Uh, and the Bible says that he's going to come back to the earth in the future. Like, it's been to a couple thousand years. So probably they did something to him. They translated him. They changed his flesh. He's now a glorified being. Translated, the Bible refers to this as a translation, um, which is a transgenic metamorphosis in scientific terminology. It's something that the human species, was designed to go through this metamorphosis if we live long enough, um, which Adam and Eve did. But then when they sinned, they were kept from the tree, and that sustained them. It had something in it that kept their DNA replenished and properly functioning, and they didn't die. And then they would go through this metamorphosis and become immortal and have abilities and things like that. And this is translation is something that happens to the human being where they get connected to God on a much more intimate level, and you transition into a new phase of existence. We're like a butterfly type species, actually. And I believe angels used to be reproductive when they start out, and then they go through a translation as well. So we are like them. Jesus said we are like them in that respect. And that's in Luke 20:36. So you're looking at a biological species that is transcendent, and they're on the top. They're, the highest level, highest order of creation. Um, uh, Species that are to represent God in their respective domains. Like, humanity is supposed to represent God here on earth and be connected with Him. And that's how God created us. So when these beings come here, the Bible refers to their mode of transportation as a chariot. Well, people that were writing about it, that's all they knew what a vehicle was. They knew that that's something you ride in. It's pulled by horses. What else is going to carry something that heavy? And, so in Second Kings, where you have the account of the abduction, he says that that's the chariot of Israel and the horses of fire. So they're not normal horses. And I'm like, he's just doing his best to describe this. It's something that they're writing in. And you'll see it in artwork that they'll show this chariot like they had 2,000 years ago, like the Romans and the Egyptians would ride around in these little carts with wheels. And I'm like, it's not going to have a wheel designed to roll on the ground if it can fly. And those horses of fire probably aren't horses. You might be seeing fire or some plasma and electrical discharges and some pretty crazy stuff. And it does talk about fire and lightning and the sound of waterfall and thunders and all this stuff. Um, Ezekiel chapter 1 and 10 is another, the wheels within wheels, uh, which I have a prop for that.
All right.
Hold on.
All right.
All right. So uh, Ezekiel first when he first sees it, he says it's like wheels within wheels, right? So this I'm speculating, but this is kind of how it makes sense to me, how he describes the chariot of these angels. When it shows up, he says it's zipping back and forth erratically, and he sees wheels within wheels. So if it flies like this, past like that, and these things they're immune to like gravity and inertia and stuff like that. So you might see it all cattywampus, in a weird angle because they don't care about aerodynamics. So they'll be like this, and he'll see wheels within wheels. And if there's like portals, that'll look like eyes. They could be different shapes within the spokes, eyes within the spokes. And he mentions that. He's like, there's wheels within wheels and eyes within the spokes and and it flies like that, but then it changes like that, right? Then it's more like a bird, right? Because it seems to have these wings, like this. And he's trying to figure this out because like only thing he's ever seen fly that was a bird. So it's probably got some kind of wing on it, but wait a second, these wings are different. This looks like wings that go down and wings that go up. They're not flapping. They touch on the distant ends, so it's got more than one set of wings and they're touching. That's how he describes it. He says the wings are straight, they don't flap, wings above, wings below, touching on the distant end. And as you're reading all this, you're trying to picture it in your head like, what kind of a weird, funky looking creature is this? Says that there's four heads. There's probably emblems here on the paneling, like the emblem of an ox, it could be something like that, possibly. Like we put emblems on our jets and stuff now. Skunk Works has got a little skunk on there. If they'd have saw that, they'd have probably said, it's a flying skunk. And then it said it has a dome on top that you could see through. Um, it's chrysolite, it says. And then the bottom, it says it's made of beryllium, so he even mentions this metal. In the Old Testament, like this is 3,000 years plus ago, and he's talking about a type of metal on this angelic chariot that is made out of a heat resistant material that we even use now with making rocket nozzles because they're so resistant to heat. And that just so happens to be on the bottom of this chariot, this heat resistant metal that, with this interesting shape, a wheel within wheel is a saucer, but then from the side, it looks more like something with wings above and below touching on the distant end with a dome on top. And then he talks about God's throne, which we now know if they're coming from distant planets, even planets, but solar systems, like totally star systems gone, Alpha Centauri, um, and beyond. If they're doing that, they're having to create wormholes, which our science now knows. Quantum theory talks about how you can create a quantum singularity and fold time space and go from A to B, uh, what they call it, 0 point, something like that. And you could travel faster than light by folding space time and punching through this quantum singularity. So you're here and then poof, you're there. And if you're able to create a quantum singularity to do that, you could create a quantum singularity to open up a portal anywhere you want, and you can open up a portal to God's throne. And so these angels are using their technology. So we're not used to thinking of angels and technology going together, but I'm like, think Star Wars, right? The Jedi Knight. He goes around, he has a lightsaber. Can anybody use a lightsaber? Later versions of Star Wars kind of trash that, but originally only a Jedi Knight could use the lightsaber. because he had something in him, the force resonated in him and gave him this ability to use this exotic technology because it connected with his spirit. Um, these beings uh, are creating technology it connects with more beyond what we understand of as matter in our spirit. But they're able to do things with it that um, is like magic to us. But that I believe, and there's many kinds. Um, they're not all around. We see the Tic Tacs and stuff like that, and I know some of those that probably we've been monkeying with this technology since a long time, 40s at least, but probably even before. And our ability to reverse engineer it, plus we've had help from some of them. Um, we have stuff now that rivals their stuff. Um, Bible actually predicts that. And now, when you see a UFO, it could be ours, it could be theirs. Yeah, you're not going to be able to tell. But they're all different sizes and shapes. I see these ones they get in videos and stuff now, like a pyramid. Straight up pyramid floating in the sky at some sort of weird angle. I've seen cubes with a sphere inside, embedded inside of it, flying. Um, then the Tic Tac shape is like this pill. There's these cylinders. So the UFOs, this is the classic shape, right? But there are many, many different kinds, and and it's because they don't have to be aerodynamic, so they could be any kind of different shape, and that's basically what a UFO is to me.
Now, how about 2,000, 3,000 years ago, if they existed back then how did they get the metal when metal didn't exist yet?
On their planets,
Well,
they, I mean, the Bible says in Job 38 that before the foundations of the earth were established, the stars of God shouted for joy and gave glory to him. So this was before the rebellion, before they sinned. So there had been life in the cosmos for billions of years. And Christians will argue about that. I know the Earth's only 6,000 years old. I'm an old Earth theorist. I believe Earth is like maybe 5 billion years old, but I don't believe in evolution. I believe God created us. I believe God created the life on this planet. There is variation within a species that we can see, test, demonstrate. But to suggest that we came from a pool of slime, no. I don't think science supports that. We are far too complex for that. Now, they do have mathematics that says, in physics, they say that in a particular uh, in a cosmos setting is that vast, you can have a variation in the complexity of the matter or in the complexity of the environment. That if there's more chaos over here, there's more organization over here. So they think they have some math that can kind of support that theory. But still, um, even matter, even rudimentary matter itself, atoms have an advanced structure. They consist of energy. They follow laws. The laws of physics are very complex, very stable. And we can do things with it, manipulate it and stuff. Because of these laws, you can count on them. I mean, the computer that we're talking through right now is a level of sophistication that exists because we have the Lego building blocks to put it all together. The sophistication is there in the structure of our universe that defies not having a designer. So there has to be an intelligent designer for our existence, and I'm arguing that for even just existence, even in inanimate matter. It's too complicated to just exist without having been designed. Uh, and then the fact that you could take matter and then create something as sophisticated as life, a sentient being capable of remembering things and learning and growing and expanding. and becoming even more sophisticated over time. That would not be possible without an intelligence and a consciousness behind it. So I forget what your question was, but
It's all
but
right.
that's where I ended with it.
It's all right. Now, the biggest conspiracy out there is it's like the it's like the famous theory about Area 51.
Mm.
Do you think at one time that they was dealing with UFOs and aliens?
Area 51?
Yeah,
Uh, well, they have S4,
yeah.
which is it's not at Area 51 central site, but it's like off, you know, out in the boonies on the edge, suburbs of Area 51 or whatever. It's in the inside of a mountain. They have this panel that opens up, and I totally believe Bob Lazar's account. I think out of all of the different whistleblowers out there, he took a huge, huge risk as being a pioneer whistleblower and just blowing the lid off of it. Uh, he has credentials in terms of being a physicist and being able to talk about the technology. He strikes me as very credible. And they overplayed their hand when they scrubbed his records. And I've read about that, that the guy, when you try to look up, well, where did he ever work? Where did he ever get his education? It's like everything is gone, you know?
Wow.
And they're like, he is such a blank slate that it's blatantly obvious that someone scrubbed his existence. Um, trying to find the school that he went to, and get his credentials and all of that. And uh, it's like they couldn't find anything on the guy. And they're like, this is not normal. I could take me or garden variety person off the street and find stuff on him. They couldn't do that with him. And they're like, he just like doesn't exist. What has he been doing to pay for the house that he lives in for the last 20 years? They couldn't explain it, right? And then they're like, well, they overplayed their hand. They scrubbed him so clean that it's like he never existed. And that in itself speaks to something that they're trying to hide. And I think that adds to his credibility. So they overplayed their hand trying to hide it. And Area 51, I think, was a hub. It may still be. I think they got a lot more infrastructure in place now. They've been building underground. They have technology. Um, there's a guy that was a Department of Defense contractor. I wish I had his name offhand, but he's in YouTube. His hand is melted. One of his hands is melted off, and it looks like a very weird, like, what the hell happened to your hand, dude? And he would tell you that he was hit with a plasma, some kind of exotic plasma rifle, and it completely vaporized his hand. That was a firefight that was going on underground with some Navy SEALs that were going to take out some 7 foot tall entities that are subterranean and they're all over the planet. Um, and when we find them, we send special teams down to take them out because they're really nasty. Um, and they're hard to fight. But yeah, and this was his story, and he was talking at some UFO conference and stuff, and he was telling all this stuff. And I've been in the military all my life, so listening to him talk, the lingo that he used as a contractor, it struck me as very credible on that guy. And I'm like, yeah. And I know some people go overboard and they think, oh, there's an underground base. The base where I used to work, um, 144th Fighter Wing here in Central California. Um, every now and then some people would come out to the gate and they were saying, oh, you're lying. We know that you got an underground base here and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, look, I work at this base for, 25 years and I have a top secret SCI clearance. If they had computers down there, I would have been the one to go down there to work on them. I have the clearance to do it. I would have seen cabling go to places that are extremely classified. I had access to all of the classified places there at the base. There was nothing subterranean at the base. So people will sometimes see things and you can't convince them that something is not there. Uh, However, being in the military, I have heard stories from people. I heard stories from people that worked at NORAD and saw things that weren't supposed to exist. Personal friend of mine saw some things in the outer atmosphere that are not supposed to exist. Uh, the velocity that they were flying in a V formation, the size of a school bus, back in the 80s. It was like a V formation of objects way out there in space. You know, Here we're tinking around, struggling to get up there with the shuttle, the space shuttle, right? These things were just zipping around, like nothing, like take an F-15 up and then just keep going and then fly it around up there, and we had the SR-71, but these things were even better than that in the 80s. So uh, those were probably, they might have been ours. Lockheed's been working on this stuff for a long time, Boeing probably, maybe some other companies. And they might have had that stuff. But then again, according to the Bible, we have a higher dimension on this planet. The Bible indirectly refers to it as first heaven, but Earth is a larger planet in a higher dimension. And there's otherworldly beings that live there, and some of them are angels. Perhaps even the majority of them are angels. Lucifer rules over this planet at that in that higher realm. He rules the majority of it. He doesn't have carte blanche control over everything, but he does control probably the bulk of it. There's countries up there, just like here, it's a planet, it's a physical planet, just like Earth, with continents and everything. And it's this planet, our dimension is a mirror reflection of that one. So if you want to know what the country is like above our heads, look at the country you're in. Um, the Prince of Persia in the book of Daniel is a demonic entity. I mean, he's a fallen angel, and he was ruling over Persia. Well, look at Iran. Not a very nice place, right? It was even a nasty place back in Daniel's day, and it's still a nasty place. They had now in the 70s it was different, or 60s and before they had democracy. It was like completely different world. But there was that undercurrent of radicalism that was there that just blew up. And in early 1970s, they became the radical nation they are now. So that was probably because this demonic entity like had some battles up there and took over. And so this world that's above us, they have technology too. And so sometimes the things that we see in the sky are right here on this earth, but in a higher dimension. And they manifest here, boom, they pop down here every now and then, or we can see them because for whatever reason, they want to come down here for something. Uh, but when they come down here, it's kind of a big deal because we're protected. And there's a lot of politics in the heavenly realm. Kind of strange to think of it that way, but we're protected. The book of Job talks about it. Satan requests permission from God to screw with us, and he does it all the time. And we kind of ask for it when we're living in sin and doing things that God doesn't like. And the Bible documents it all over the place. And probably even on a national scale, if you have a country where like you have a town or a city or something where they're just totally doing bad stuff. Um, the veil will be a little thin there to allow bad things to come in because they're doing it to themselves. Um, so when Adam and Eve, I mean, go all the way back to Adam and Eve. They're in the garden, perfect, everything beautiful, perfect. It's like, dude, you got it all, right? Just don't eat this tree. Stay away from don't eat this fruit. Everything else, good. This one fruit out of everything here, don't eat this one. So they were probably having picnics at that stupid tree, messing around with it. You looking at it like, oh, I wonder why he doesn't want us to eat from that one. And then of course Satan shows up and he's like, God's not being straight with you, he's holding out. You would be like him if you ate this, and he's enticing them. Then they go and eat from the fruit. So what happens when they did that? Bam! They lost their authority. Satan once again has a level of dominion on this planet. Like he was trashed when he rebelled against the angels before humanity. He got cast down back down to this earth. He used to live here on this planet before us and had an angelic kingdom on this planet before humanity. The Bible talks about it. A lot of people don't see it when they read it, but it's there. He got trashed. Michael overthrew him and he got cast back down to earth. And then the earth was wiped out. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1 is when the heavens and the earth were created. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Then billions of years went by, and Satan ended up rebelling against God during all that time. And then he was using his access to the heavens and spreading deception to all these beings out there and leading this rebellion for probably millions of years, getting all these angels on the same sheet of music to turn against God. Then they had their rebellion. And then even God didn't respond to that. The archangel Michael did. And he ended up putting an end to this rebellion and casting Lucifer back to earth. That's why he went back to earth, because he started from earth. So the ancient rebellion that trashed all of existence, not just earth, but the cosmos and all life out there, started on this planet. That's what makes this planet unique. And Lucifer was cast back down here. Then in the Garden of Eden, he managed to deceive Adam and Eve. And when they did that, when they disobeyed, they basically handed a chunk of their authority on the planet because they had dominion over the earth, it said. But now the devil has some abilities because he had the ability to go to God with that and say, see, they listen to me. They say, I offer a better deal. So we've had this thing going on between God and the devil ever since then, where God created us with free will, and that's why. He wants us to be able to choose. He doesn't want robots. He wants us to choose because what's in our heart appeals to, love. We appeal to love. We appeal to God's forgiveness and mercy and love and everything goodness that God represents. If we want to be selfish and do our own thing, and then we're going to open ourselves up, and God wants to use that as an opportunity to teach us. So, okay, you don't want me? Listen to this character over here. But I'm telling you, he ain't being straight with you. Everything that he promises, it's like Microsoft, with the beta version. It all these promises, but then as soon as you turn it on, things are going to start going haywire, right? You're going to start suffering consequences. So he allows us to disobey him, and then the devil comes in and does his thing, and we start suffering consequences from that. And that's why. So we have that with the heavens here on this planet. And the devil gets the ability to come down into some places and probably abduct people and do messed up stuff when we allow him, And we kind of have to open the door to the way we live our lives, the decisions we make, and stuff like that. And then that allows that access. And in some places, you see it more than others. Um, and we see it in everyday life, in our society, where you see corruption and things like that going on in society. That's another example of it. But then there's this supernatural example of it where, you might see otherworldly things in the sky. Um, but then we're in the middle of a war, an ancient war between the heavens, in the heavens between the angels, and we got sucked into this, and then Earth is a proxy, So we got the devil doing his things, and then God's angels doing his things. So there's good guys and bad guys up there. Book of Daniel actually talks about a battle between good angels and bad angels. When Daniel was praying and fasting, Michael or Gabriel came from God's throne with a message for Daniel, but when he started to come down to the earth, he was stopped by the prince of Persia and detained for 21 days. that had to be in a higher realm, like on the outer atmosphere of Earth. Michael went there, like SEAL Team 6 behind enemy lines, that fought his way out and got Gabriel through so Gabriel could come give his message to Daniel. And then when he went to leave, he had to go back through that and fight his way back out. So they had battles up there. I bet you back then in the Old Testament, you might have been seeing some funky stuff going on in the sky. Uh, when that was going on. And see, we're seeing this stuff like that going on now. I think some of that is otherworldly battles, good guys and bad guys upstairs on this planet locally. But they also come from other worlds, other galaxies, in other dimensions. So it's big.
Now, and what is your opinion on the near-death experiences? Do you think that that's probably like abduction as well, or what is
No.
your thoughts on that?
So, well, I mean, they had like counts of people that died and no heart rate, right? No heartbeat. Um, they pop out of their body. They can hear conversations going on. Some people have been gone for like well beyond what you would expect a person to be able to survive uh, without breathing, without a heartbeat, like half hour, or even more. Um, and they can, when they come back, there's like, y'all were talking about this, and then these people over in this room next door, they were talking about this and that. And what the heck is that big thing on the roof of the building? I mean, they've had stories like that. So people have popped out of their bodies, they've seen things, they've reported things, and they're like that. There's no way they could have known that unless, there's consciousness was still here floating around and not even in the room half the time. They were somewhere else in the hospital or above the hospital or whatever. Um, I think that that happens. If people do leave their bodies, there have been accounts of people going to a glorious place, and those accounts are more frequent than the bad count than going to the bad place. But other people have gone to the bad place too. In fact, there was an account of this two doctors. They were going through medical school to gate at the same time, and then one was an atheist and the other one was a Christian, and he's trying to convince his friend all the time, right? And he's like, "Oh, you're full of it. You don't know. We're a collection of cells. We're a biological mass, And the other guy's like, "No, there's more to us than that. We have a spirit." And so they always debate. They were friends, but they would debate and kind of keep it light and joke around a lot. And they kept in touch. But later in life, one of the atheist doctor had some kind of major condition, um, and his heart kept stopping while he was in the hospital, and he started seeing stuff like demons and stuff. Uh, and when he would fall, he would felt himself slipping and falling down like through the bed and being pulled down. And at one point, he felt fire, like heat, and these things were like grabbing on him, and he was fighting and fighting, and then they would shock him and pop back into his body. This was an ordeal that kept going on for a while, like a couple days. And when he first came back, he started telling the doctors, find Dr. Jones, and he's whatever his friend's name was, and told him, I have to talk to him. I have to talk to him. What's happening to me, what I'm seeing, what I'm experiencing. I need to know what he was trying to tell me. And they tracked the guy down. He immediately got on a plane. He came and he told him, he witnessed to him there in the hospital room, and he's like, dude, it's a lot easier than you think. I didn't have to come here. All you have to do is just talk to God and say, can please forgive me, Jesus, please forgive me and save me. I'll do my best to believe you. And as he was praying, his heart condition like miraculously healed right there in the room. Like he got better. He wrote a book about it afterward, and he's given presentations and stuff and talked about it. But he became a believer because he was slipping into hell and experiencing it, feeling the emotions and the terror and all of that, and then coming back. And he did it like several times during this ordeal. And so I believe that that's a a real phenomenon. I also believe that it's possible that people could be having near-death experiences. And one of the things that's puzzled me about that is because people that like they're not even believers. They can believe whatever. They could be atheists, but they'll say that they had a near-death experience where they were taken to this glorious place, and they're like, "You don't have to believe in God or anything. No, everything's fine." Well, the Bible actually says that when Jesus died on the cross, that he descended into the earth and he went to two places. Before the cross, down below, in a lower dimension, Earth is a smaller planet, right? So heaven, first heaven, Earth is a larger planet. Hell is like a smaller planet. It's actually multiple planets, layers like an onion, and they're dimensionally varied from each other. They like vibrate at a different frequency, these planets. But it's all Earth, because the Bible says hell is in the heart of the Earth, so it's geographically located inside the Earth, smaller planet. And in that lower realm, there used to be a place called Hades, that was composed of the place of the righteous dead and then the place of torment. And then there was a chasm that divided these two places. And Jesus talked about that in the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. A place of torment, and in the parable, Lazarus is in this place of paradise where Abraham was in the Old Testament. And it's called Abraham's bosom. It's another name. So it's this paradise place is down in Hades, right? So you're not used to thinking of a good place, but in the Old Testament, before Jesus went to the cross, there was a place in the earth, in the underworld, that was a pleasant place, but it was a holding place. They weren't with God. They were there as kind of like a holding place. Um, and then this other place was really bad. Well, when Jesus died on the cross, it says that he descended and he proclaimed victory to those in the torment, and he released the captives to the ones who were in the paradise. So now in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul said to be apart from the body is to be in the presence of the Lord. So we don't go down to that paradise place anymore. So you have this paradise place, it's basically vacated. And my theory is probably these beings, these fallen angels that are still have a level of glory to them and some power, probably went down to this nice place and said, "Hey, we could use this. So when somebody has a near-death experience, we'll bring them here and make them think that, hey, it's all good. It's all good, and we can keep it nice enough to trick them at least for a few minutes, if they have a near-death experience, so then they can go back and tell all their new age buddies, hey, there's many roads to heaven, it's all good. You could believe whatever as long as uh, are a decent person, you don't have to believe in this Jesus character or anything, just be a decent person, and you'll end up at that good place. And I think that that might be going on with some of these near-death experiences as well.
Now, with hell, do you think it's what the Bible says, or do you think that we create our own hell after we die?
Yes, um, the Bible refers to a deepest hell. Um, King David mentioned that in the Psalms. And so hell is described in different areas. It's like there's an indication that there's degrees to it, like, and it has to do with the kind of person you were, the way you lived your life, and it probably resonates. You vibrate at the frequency that you're going to go down to. So some levels of the highest levels of hell are like here on the surface of the earth. They're so close that the beings that are there can be perceived here, like they bleed over. The veil's thin in some places. If you have a place where you have cursed ground, which can happen, say, during a murder, unjust spilling of blood, and the first instance of that is Cain killing his brother Abel. And God showed up and said, I hear your brother's blood crying from the ground. Now, the book of Leviticus says the life of the flesh is in the blood. So God was literally saying, I hear Abel's spirit crying out from the ground. That was a haunting. And God said, your brother's narking you off. He's telling me, his ghost is telling me. And if that wasn't enough, Hebrews chapter 11 says, by faith, though he was dead, Abel was able to speak. So he was a spirit coming back saying, yo, this was wrong. My brother killed me. And I think that I write about that in one of my books about beacon of injustice. That's why hauntings are allowed, because they're a beacon of injustice. They're like saying something very wrong happened here. It was unjust and it needs to be fixed. So if you go to a place like that and you pray the blood of Jesus, you can actually cleanse a place. So um, I've done exorcisms before over places. Um, I have, I've seen it actually happen where, in a spiritual warfare context. So that is picture of hell is just not as black and white as people think, you know. You're not necessarily always going to be trapped in that lowest place that Jesus talked about in the Lazarus parable of Lazarus and the rich man. I think some of version levels of hell are more like here on the surface, near the surface, but Earth is an onion with multiple layers. So you might be in a not so bad version, but also consider this: we got fallen angels above us, and then we also have demons, which have incredible resiliency to be able to traverse up to some of these higher dimensions, especially when we give them the authority to do it. Like a person who's living in really bad sin and doing just terrible stuff, they're kind of vulnerable to bad things and they affect their environment around them. And when you got a bunch of people doing a bunch of bad things in a condensed place, they're making sort of like a portal where bad things can come in. Because the Bible has many instances of people being possessed. And that opens this whole topic of possession, which you could do a whole show on it. But I think that people can be possessed by demons, yes, of course, but not just demons. People can be possessed by the spirits of other people that have died. And they confuse that with reincarnation because they can even have memories of the person uh, who died. And they think that they are that person reincarnated. Well, like kind of technically they are, but not in the way that they think. The spirit did reincarnate because he's possessing them. He didn't reincarnate because he was born through them when they were a baby in a hospital, unless he came and possessed them you know, when they were conceived. But each person has their own spirit, right? When you're conceived, a piece of your mother and a piece of your father put together. And if you've ever seen that under an electron microscope, it's pretty amazing, the electrical. It's a trip. You see the little polywog going in there, and then boom, there's this spark of light shoots off, and then there's like electrical stuff going on, and that is life. It's not just biological. It's a new life form just entered into being that is as part of this person's spirit and a part of that person's spirit becoming one flesh and a spirit, a new spirit. So each of us have our own spirit, but I think our spirits are capable of being, something can come in and latch into our body and overshadow us. And if it's a really dominating spirit or a really powerful one, it completely eclipses the original owner of that body and like melts with it and assumes that identity. And um and I think that that's what happens sometimes too. So you have possession can happen when you have spirits that are like here in this higher level of hell and possessing people and stuff.
Now, now, do you believe in reincarnation?
So Hebrews 9:27, it's appointed unto man to die only once, and then the judgment. So the Bible teaches that spirits are not just recycling, right? However, a spirit is possible to, because hell is so nebulous, there's many levels to it. If a spirit managed to evade the demonic things running around, because that's another thing about that upper level of hell. It's not necessarily a very safe place to be because there's demonic things running around looking for energy sources. Um, and you're a sitting duck, it's like prison, right? You have to find a group to help you out and kind of adopt their policies or something like that. So the underworld here is a very bizarre ecosystem, but there's a lot of predators there, spiritual predators, you could say, and they will glom onto everything that they can find. So, but if you can manage to escape from them, uh, and maybe possess someone, well, then you can kind of try to prolong your existence in a very disobedient way, and it doesn't go good for you on Judgment Day if you do that. Um, Speaking for anybody who dies and remembers this conversation, it's like, well, maybe I could just go possess somebody and keep living. Um, yeah, so I think reincarnation might exist like that, uh, but it's not good. Uh, and and if somebody suspects that they're the reincarnation of someone, they might very well be possessed by someone. And I would recommend um, an exorcism, prayer, and honestly, you could ask for the spirit to leave, and 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 if it doesn't want to, command that it leave in the name of Jesus, make it leave. Um, you are the owner of your body, so you have ownership of your body, and that's one thing the original owner of the body has. It's a level of authority, and then plus, especially if you're on the same sheet of music with God, um, the prayer of salvation is actually a prayer of exorcism. Baptism, the act of baptism, has intrinsically associated with it is exorcism. It's built in. So when a person is baptized as their public declaration of faith, they're actually being put through this exorcism exercise. So if they did have any Klingons, which I think are a lot more common than people think, um, and it's not just spirits. I think that there's energy and there's residue too, and it's just floating around, and it can have many aspects of a person within it, embedded within it. Um, have you ever heard of the field of psychometry?
I have not, no.
The phenomenon of psychometry. Well, you might have seen movies, right, where they call in a psychic investigator and they're trying to find somebody, a missing person,
Oh
or
yeah.
solve a crime. Who killed this person, whatever, and they say, uh, he had this thumb drive in his pocket, you know, see if you can get anything off of it. And then they put it in the psychic's hand and they'll be like, oh, I feel like my throat, like he slit my throat. And the cop's like tripping out because he's like, we didn't release that information, the news, right? And it makes you wonder. That's common, there's a movie called To Catch a Killer. Brian Dennehy played in that movie. He played Gacy, I think, the serial killer. The way they busted that serial killer, they used a psychic to help him, and they put some object in her hand, and she was like describing the crime scene and describing what happened, how he was killed, and like, well, how is that? Well, there's obviously even just inanimate objects can have embedded energy in them, consciousness type, like it came from consciousness, but it's packed with information, visual, audio, visual, emotional, all of it. I mean, they could see things, they can hear things, they can smell things. They sense textures, like, oh, I feel something wet and hot, coming down. I think it's my blood. It's just coming down in the front. So they'll get all of this, right? Well, and I think when a person is has some traumatic event happen to them, like a murder, all of this emotion is just coming out, and it's both psychological, a lot of brain power going on. Your brain's just going crazy, but your spirit too, and it's leaking out into the environment. And if blood is shed, even more so, because then it's leaking out from the blood and the residue is there in the blood. Your life is in the blood. So blood is like supercharged with this energy, right? And they can pick up on this energy and like translate it almost like a USB drive. This thing's got a bunch of information in it, this little thing, right? Now, if you have the gift to do that, it's like you can translate those ones and zeros. It's there, it's in there, right? So that's there's energy that just floats around like that all over the place. And we're like sponges and we're picking it up and we're probably subconsciously aware of it. Um, you may go to a place and suddenly you want to eat a taco, right? Where did that come from? You weren't thinking about taco. Well, I'm always thinking about tacos, but but I think a lot of things that come to our attention and stuff at a subconscious level, and then we become conscious of it, and we don't know where that came from. I think a lot of those things could be just like energies floating around. And I don't know if you've ever been to a place where you show up at a place and you just don't feel good. Like the
Yeah.
place bothers you and you want to leave. I've been to places like that. And I'm like, yeah, oh, some bad mojo there, you know. But on the flip side, I've been to places that are like, um, well, the best of the best is the presence of the Holy Spirit. I've been to places where there's people in worship and there's some music playing and there's a presence that's there that's so thick in the atmosphere. You're like, something going to happen. Something like, I don't know, something impossible, I believe, could really happen here. Like so and so over here could probably stand up from that wheelchair and I would believe it because I feel something here. So I've been in places like that. No, unfortunately, not enough. Because when you have been in a place like that, you just want it more. Um, but an outpouring of the Spirit, there was a lady I knew that was in a place like that, and she said the Spirit was so dense in the atmosphere. It was just like an amazing presence as they worshiped there with this one group of people. And then she went to the dentist, and the dentist was like saying to her, "Okay, what other dentist have you been seeing?" She said, "You're my only dentist." He's like, "No, you've been seeing another dentist, and they put a lot of work into your mouth. So what other dentist have you been seeing?" She's like, "I haven't." And he said, "I don't believe you because someone took all of the porcelain fillings out of your mouth and replaced them with gold." And she was like, "Really? I felt something in my mouth during that worship, you know?" And he was like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "That was the Holy Spirit. Jesus must be a really good dentist." But that's the kind of stuff, that you would expect when you have a manifestation of God and from a higher realm. So there's both kinds of manifestations where the energy and beings, celestial beings, could come from the higher realms down to us and pay us a visit, especially if we're worshiping them, and praising God and giving thanks. But then on the flip side, when you're doing stuff that basically worships the devil, you know, in either directly or indirectly, you invite dark things to come up. And instead of receiving healings and dental upgrades or whatever, expect sickness, and other things like that of a not so good nature, which those are more common.
Now, do you think that UFOs and Bigfoots are connected?
Yeah, yeah. So when I first started reading the Bible, I mean, I had this kind of crazy story about how I came into how am I this paranormal Christian? It's a weird combo because Christians are usually like they don't like to talk about paranormal stuff and they'll sometimes want to just label it all as demonic. But on the flip side, you get the Pentecostals that are more like signs and wonders and stuff, and so they're a little more open to talking about stuff like that. And then of course Catholics talk about purgatory, which I think there is a like multiple levels of hell, but their concept of how you get there and stuff is like, I think that's not accurate. If you're a believer in Jesus, you don't go down, period. You don't have to work your way to heaven. It doesn't work that way. The Bible doesn't say that. But anyway, aside from that, um, yeah, oh yeah, Bigfoot. Um, Genesis chapter 6, right? Which I mentioned when we started out. You got the Watchers, according to the Book of Enoch, which is the unabridged version of Genesis chapter 6. And the Book of Enoch was voted out of the Bible in the Council of Nicaea. Um, they should not have taken that out, in my opinion. But it's not like we don't have it. It's there. We can go and read it if we want. And I think it's inspired and it's actually quoted from the Book of Jude that it is in the Bible. So that's another reason why it's like, why'd you take it out? You're actually referencing it in the Book of Jude. And the Book of Jude references the Book of Enoch. And it's the Watchers, which were the sons of God, the B'nai Elohim. They're fallen angels. They descended on Mount Hebron in the Middle East, over there in Palestine, ancient Palestine. They integrated with human society. They bred with humans. They had these half breeds that were called Nephilim. That word Nephilim, there's another word, Raphaim, means the same thing, but that word in Hebrew, Raphaim, translates as giants or shades and spirits. So if you want to know what demons are, where do demons come from? A demon is not the same thing as a fallen angel. Two different things. Fallen angel is the father, that the sired this Nephilim, this Raphaim creature. It was a physical being at one time, and then it died, and its ghost became a Nephilim, a spirit, a demon, what we call a demon. Demon is the Greek word for it. Devil is more like the Hebrew translation of it, but shades and spirits are these devils. So they're more powerful than a human because they have part angel. They're part angel. Angels are immortal, crossing with mortals. So their children were mortals, but they would live to be like 500 years old or whatever. And then when they finally died, they had more energy, more power, more glory within them. So they're able to like stay up on the surface probably, um, and go around and possess people. Their ability to possess people seems to be a little bit better than a human's ability to possess people because they were more powerful. Um, but that's what they are. That's what these demons are. So going back, you have these Nephilim, these hybrids, right? And then God sent the flood of Noah to wipe them all out. But then they came back, which is another indicator of like, how could they come back after the flood if everything was wiped out? It has to be an otherworldly source. They were not human. Their origin is from off this planet. Then they came back even after the flood and infected the same area where we call ancient Palestine, Promised Land. And that there was a huge contingent of them there, although they were all over the planet. They were even here in the United States. In fact, I saw a sign. A friend of mine pointed a sign out to me that there might be a Nephilim here in Clovis, California, um, because it's a big sign that said when they were building this underground tunnel to go under the freeway back in 1998, they found a 10-foot tunnel, a 10-foot skeleton, human skeleton, and I'm like, it's just a sign on the wall. I'm like, what the? Who put the sign? I want to see this thing, Yeah. Even though I don't know, I want to be near it too long because it's a demon now. If its ghost is around, it's a demon. Like it's not good. But they also crossed with animals, and it talks about it in the Greek legends and stuff, right? That these beings had the ability to change shape. They were shapeshifters, skinwalkers, right? And they might have been able to change their biological form, and like the Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing, right? How it could mimic a life form for a little while and then turn into something else, like the dog. It started out as a dog and then it became a person. Well, there's a reality to that. They could assume the form of a biological entity because they're that advanced and that powerful, and then mate with that animal and create a hybrid of that animal. So that might have been happening. According to the Greek legends, that's what they did. But look at what we do with chimeras, right? We mix and match genetics of animals and humans and stuff. We got ears growing on the backs of mice. We got human hearts growing on the outside of a pig and weird stuff that we're doing now, right? So they had that technology too. So they might have been in labs creating like, oh, let's create a bat rat, you know, let's create a dog cat, or whatever. Um, so if you've ever seen depictions of demons, what do they usually have? Horns,
Horns, yeah.
maybe bat wings, maybe claws and fangs. They're usually these mixtures of animals, like chimeras, aren't they? Like a human body, but like a goat's head or a dog's head with horns
Yeah.
or scales. There are these weird things that usually look kind of lethal and pretty nasty, but horns and claws and talons and those kind of things are common with these depictions of demons. And this is like with people that their imagination's going somewhere, but it's prophetic because it's probably real. They probably do look like that. I mean, the Balrog in Lord of the Rings probably is really something like that. And Baal in the Old Testament, if you remember Baal, that the Hebrews, the ancient Israelites, were like worship him, and because the Canaanites worshipped him. Baal was a minotaur, as a man's body and a bull's head. Uh, and in Greek mythology, it was called a minotaur, but same entity, different name in different culture. And then you had all these Egyptian mythologies, Set, had a dog's head. You had Horus, had a bird's head, but a human body. You had the Sphinx, um, cat body, human head, weird combos, right? That's because these fallen angels were coming down and crossing with animals and creating all of these weird hybrids, right? So Bigfoot is probably like a gorilla human or a gorilla angel hybrid. And they ain't when I say angel, I mean they were humanoid angels because they had human DNA. They're glorified human angels. There are humans out there. That's a popular, like a common species in the heavens, like the Pleiadians, the Nordics, and all that. All the people that talk the alien language about, oh, here's all these different species. So there are humanoids that are out there, and the fallen angels, the watchers, the ones that descended here on Earth, were human. And that's why they preferred to cross with us. That's why they were attracted to us, because they were human. These were fallen angels. They were reverting against their glorified nature and reverting back to their reproductive state and became attracted to these women that were here. And then they crossed with them and had hybrid children. But some of them were pretty twisted, extremely lustful, right? So bestiality, you know, they were okay with that too, probably. And so they crossed with a bunch of animals. And then so you started seeing these weird hybrid creatures running around that had a common thread of violence. Genesis chapter 6 said there was just an incredible amount of violence in the world back then. So much that God was like, I'm done. This is just this has gone off the rails. I'm gonna wipe it all out. I got to start over. It's so that's I think what the Bigfoot is some kind of Nephilim type species that's here today. And then of course the Bigfoot is commonly associated with UFOs. So um, you know, I'm open to other ideas too. It could be a species that was brought here from another planet, and they're just really good at adapting and living in the woods.
Uh,
So
and
yeah,
why do you think, and nobody has ever captured a perfect picture of a Bigfoot because the videos and pictures you see now is kind of blurry a little bit? And why do you think
yeah,
nobody's ever captured a HD photo
of a Bigfoot.
of a Bigfoot?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So this actually supports the transgenic species theory because if Bigfoot is a Nephilim, the Nephilim were known to have supernatural abilities. And this is from legends, the Pan, for example, from Greek mythology. He was this goat's body, but a human torso, right? And he would go around playing the flute and then like mesmerize people, and they would follow him, right?
Yeah.
Um, and do whatever he wanted. He could charm them and like mind control. Um, other entities had other abilities. So I think one of their abilities is the ability to alter their vibrational frequency of their atomic structure. And this is what angels do, by the way, when they pop into this dimension and go out. Um, they have physical bodies. They are biological beings, but they vibrate at a higher frequency. That's their normal vibration. And when they live up there, they don't have to do anything. They just they're normal residents up there. But as a glorified being, they have the ability to lower it so that they can come down here and then like poof, they're there. They're visible. So I kind of liken it to maybe our ability to hold our breath and jump into a swimming pool, swim around underwater a little bit. You don't really belong there. You might get some technology and stay down there longer, snorkel or, tank of oxygen on your back or whatever. But it's not your normal place, right? And you pop back out. You live up here, but you can go down there for periods of time, brief periods or whatever. Um, and there's areas that are gray, but for the most part, they're up there. But they are able to come down here. So now when you get this breaking the rules and one of those glorified beings crosses with a being down here, a mortal or an animal, then you get an animal that has like glorified flesh and it's vibrating at a higher frequency and it's like popping in and out of this dimension. And it may even have that ability to pop in and out of this dimension and maybe to a lower dimension or a higher dimension. So, have you seen Lord of the Rings?
I have not, no.
Oh my gosh. Oh, the pain. Now I can't even hardly explain it to you. There's a part in the movie where Frodo's got the ring, right? And he's like, you know, struggling with this ring. Like, should I put it on? Should I put it on? Because when he puts it on, he turns invisible. Everybody around him is like he can't see them. And he can see them. They can't see him. But everything's kind of weird and distorted. And he's like feeling kind of like, oh, and it's kind of messing with his mind. And then plus it connects him with the really bad guy. He can sense when he puts it on. So um but when he does that, it's like he's still a part of this reality, but not 100%. Like you could wave your hand and it would probably go through him. So he's still seeing you. But so he's like sort of here and sort of not. Um, and I think that that's what these Bigfoot are able to do. I think they can probably make themselves like invisible or semi-transparent anyway. So if they're standing in front of a tree or something, you see, and they're not moving, you may not see them at all. If they move, you might catch some kind of a visual distortion, but then you'd be like, "Oh, what was that?" You know, like the Predator. Have you seen the movie The Predator?
I have, yeah.
Okay, it might be some sort of like look like a cloaking type technology like that, but it's not a technology in this case. It would be their inherent ability to change their molecular vibration and just like sort of not be there, you know. And I actually had a friend that encountered Bigfoot. Um, him and his buddies were on a hunting trip when they were kids, and they were left up there in the woods. And a Bigfoot stole their buck. They shot a buck, and through his scope, he saw something step out of the woods and grab the buck. 750-pound buck just flopped it over his shoulder,
Wow.
disappeared in the brush. These dudes were like within 10 feet of it. They couldn't see it. And they were like, the guy was looking through his scope, like through across a ravine into the next mountain over, and he saw the buck in the clearing, and his friends were going to it, like seeing them through the brush and the trees and stuff. And when they were almost there on top of it, he saw this thing just step in, grab the buck, throw it over his shoulder, and then step out. And then, like, 10 seconds later, they walked into the clearing where the buck was, and he's like screaming and yelling to, get back over here. They're like, what the hell's wrong with you? They come back and he told them what they saw, what he saw. They're like, no, get out of town. It's like, you saw the blood where the buck was, right? What the hell else is going to get rid of that buck? Um, so, well, maybe a bear. No, no, dude, bears don't grab something and throw it over the shoulder. Yeah, no. But besides, you would have seen a bear. I don't know how the hell this thing did it, And yeah, they had this crazy thing. And they tried to hunt it. It was like walking around them. They could smell it coming and going, like this horrible stench. And they're like, they didn't know what was causing it. Or they would be walking and they thought, oh, I think I hear it. On the count of three, stop walking. One, two, three. And then they would hear a step, you know, like right next to them. They're like looking around. They cannot see, and um, so the story that he told, of course, the I'll tell you the main one. I know we're out of time, kind of, but
Sorry.
he had to go to bathroom. He had to go to bathroom, right? And they were taking shifts. They were too afraid to sleep. This thing had come and it ripped the net up that they had all their food in, and it took a can of beans, ripped it in half, and ate the beans and stuff. And they're like, man, this thing is deadly, It's freaking strong. And we can't let this thing sneak up on us when we're asleep, we gotta stay guard with our weapons locked and loaded, right? And one guy, it was like around midnight or whatever, and he had to take a dump really bad. And he's like, I don't want to dump right here by the fire. That's not cool. But but not too far, So he goes maybe 10 feet away or so where a tree is, and he goes to the other side of the tree. He squats down, puts his rifle right, leaning in the tree, right where he's at. So he's like, it's not far. He can grab it really quick if he needs to. He drops down, and right at the moment of fecal exodus, right? It's he's dropping a deuce at the most vulnerable moment. Suddenly, thing is right in front of him.
Wow.
It's like it's like he didn't even see it or hear it approach. It just suddenly steps right in front of him. And he's like, "Oh, what do I do?" And before he can even react to grab his rifle, the thing reaches down, snatches his rifle up, and takes his rifle, snaps it like a twig, slams both pieces of the rifle to the ground. It's pissed. It's like, you are hunting me in my backyard. First, you kill my food, or maybe, hey, that buck was a friend of mine, you know? Uh, and then you think you're gonna come here and shoot me? Really? I mean, this thing was pissed, and it totally could have snapped his head off if it wanted to, but it didn't. This one was a very merciful Bigfoot because it could have killed him easily. And even after they spent the whole day hunting and it was messing with him, walking around him and stuff, and it's like, these people, these freaking losers over here in my backyard, you know? Yeah, and it did that and scared the crap out of this dude, man. He scrambled back over to camp. After it did that, and it was just looking at him all pissed off, and then it took like one step and then like just disappeared into the darkness and it was gone.
Wow. And
So yeah,
and do you think have they traveled through like a portal?
I think that well, you could call it a portal, but I don't know if you would actually see an opening or
Oh
anything.
yeah,
No, their
yeah.
their body itself is changing, almost like Star Trek Beam Me Up, right?
Yeah.
But they became demolecularized. This is different. This is just changing the frequency, the vibrational frequency, and it's like from our perspective, they're just poof, gone. From their perspective, the scenery changes. They're like here in this dimension, and then suddenly maybe the woods are a little denser or something, or maybe this mountain looks slightly different. It's the same matter, but it's got a different organization to it and stuff, and it might be slight variances in their environment
So,
depending
so-
on how much they shift themselves.
and so they kind of time travel.
Well, I don't know if that's time. This is dimensions.
Yeah.
This is the dimension of space. So geographical space. Like I can inhabit this chair, and then if I'm varying my time, I could pop out of here and then pop up tomorrow or yesterday or something. But if I'm varying my space, then this room may not even be here. This house may not be here in a lower or higher dimension. I could be like floating in the air and then fall down, right? Depending on how it happens. So changing your spatial location with your variance, it's going to change your environment.
Now, what is your thoughts? Oh, so I'm going to turn it towards how the paranormal now. And what is your thoughts on poltergeist?
So a lot of these phenomenon could be a lot of different things. Um, I have a poltergeist in my house here, and it's me. Uh, uh, seriously, when I was in school and I was spending a lot of time on a computer in the other room over there doing my homework all the time, every day, hours and hours and hours, and it was in the loft, right? And after 2 years of this, at night, when my wife would be on watching TV downstairs, we're hearing typing on the computer. And I'm like, something in my gut was telling me that that was me, like energy that I left up there. And I've heard of that, that poltergeists usually are energy from a living person. Not always, but they usually are. That's why they're so powerful because they keep getting re-energized from the energy of the living person. And my wife has told me too that like I'll get up and go to the bathroom and she could still feel me laying there
Wow.
next to her. Um, so that's one form of poltergeist that fortunately it's benign in this case, it's not throwing knives or anything. Uh, but you can have situations where you have like sibling rivalry with kids, and if one of the kids is just really angry all the time, it could create poltergeist manifestations that are really bad and sometimes dangerous. And the kid doesn't even mean that consciously, but it's coming out in different ways. So the paranormal has just got so many different tendrils in terms of the way that different phenomenon can interact and connect to other phenomenon. For example, poltergeist activity creates a free roaming energy that's like a dessert for something that's floating around looking for an energy source to feed on. A demonic entity, for example, would see that and and be attracted to it, want to feed on it, and maybe even take that energy and absorb it and become part of it. And so it alters the demonic entity's personality slightly. It's almost like getting possessed, So you can have demonic entities that are like conglomerations of multiple spirits and people's energy and stuff. But then they are their own unique entity, and they just sort of take all of this and in it's its own thing. So that's one form of poltergeist. But then there's also people, a spirit who dies, or even an animal. My wife saw my cat after it died. Uh, we were out in the yard a week after Buster had died, and I buried him in the yard. I put a little cross there for him and everything. And when we were out in the yard working, Buster would always come out and he was like curious, like, what are you humans doing out here? This is my spot and you're messing with my spot. I like those plants. Leave them alone. I like to lay there. So he was very much like that. But he was also curious. Like we'd pull weeds and he would come and look at the weed and like, why are you pulling that out? You could tell, you could see it in his eyes. Like, why are you pulling that out? I don't understand. What's the point? Um, so he would go around. So my wife was out in the yard and she felt something brush against her leg and she looked and she saw Buster walk right past her and then like disappeared into the bushes. And she's like, "What?"
Wow.
So Buster gave her a visit, and he actually brushed her leg on that occasion. So she felt that's technically a poltergeist. Uh, I've had those were probably demonic. Um, After I got saved through this radical encounter with Jesus when I turned 21, and that's where I turned all this paranormal investigation type stuff that I used to do and switched it to like, what does God have to say about this? And I started reading the Bible about all this stuff. That's why my first book is called Aliens in the Bible. And then the subtitle is A Biblical Perspective of Supernatural Entities, Realms of Existence, and Phenomenon. And so, like, I'm reading the Bible, I'm seeing paranormal stuff on every page. So I'm writing notes, you know? So I have all this paranormal knowledge in my head, but I have a biblical worldview. So it's really kind of weird. To a lot of Christians, anyways, it's really kind of weird. But I can relate to both paranormal people and then also Christians. Just use their language and say, okay, here's what I think is happening here. Um, so poltergeist in general, I think it's just energy that's free roaming. Um, and we have a lot more abilities than we're aware of consciously. And so we can create them. We maybe not even conscious of it. Some people are gifted at it. I mean, it's there. It's part of them, and they'll maybe have that aspect of their being that they're capable of doing that. Um, and then there's also beings that when you die, you have more energy than your average disincarnate spirit, and then they're able to manipulate physical matter, and so that's where you're seeing poltergeist type activity from a disincarnate being, and it's here rather than in heaven. So that's usually not a good sign.
And the last question is, and what do you think happens after we die?
Okay. Um, if you're a believer and you put your faith in Jesus, the Apostle Paul made it very simple. To be apart from the body is to be in the presence of the Lord. So you get the benefit of going to heaven, which is not even on this planet. So I didn't get into that, but there are three heavens, technically. Some say more, but second heaven, they're basically taking the idea of second heaven and expounding on it and saying it's a lot of them. But first heaven is here on earth in a higher dimension, larger planet. Second heaven is multi-dimensional cosmos because every planet that is out there is a multi-dimensional construct. The entire universe is multi-dimensional. So when you change the vibrational frequency, you end up in a different universe and an entire universe with stars, planets, and everything, right? So all of these stars, planets, and everything in the universe exist in multiple dimensions. It's layered reality. And that's the nature of atomic structure. And then there's the highest heaven, which is the third heaven, and that's a glorified planet where God has his throne. And it's the capital of creation. And God has his throne, and the Bible describes it as a planet. There's a city there, and it's a physical city called New Jerusalem, and it's going to be moved here to earth in the future. So if it's coming to earth in the future, it has to be on a physical planet now. You can't take a non-physical city and move it to a physical planet. I mean, it is a physical city. It's just in a higher dimension on another planet. And that's where God's throne is. So that's the third heaven. So we will go to be with God in the third heaven, which that heaven is apparently populated by a lot of ghosts because uh, our bodies are going to be resurrected from the dead in the future. So we're going to only be like a ghostly, like a part of our body is going to be there, where our physical body, there's merit to this body. God will resurrect it from the dead. So there's a transdimensional nature to your flesh that is redeemable, and God is all into the salvation. And let's pull that sucker out of there, even if you got burned up, right? I'm thinking whatever body you have left, because even your spirit body is a body, and your spirit body is composed of a kind of matter. I'll call it an exotic matter, but it is still matter. Think about this. You get these ghost investigators. These ghosts are speaking through ghost boxes, if you've ever seen that.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, what is that? Well, they say it's like jumping around through all these different radio channels, and it'll grab a word off of a radio channel, and it'll send that word through the box, right? And they're so good at manipulating electromagnetic field that they can grab different words from different radio stations and stuff and speak through these boxes. So they're manipulating the electromagnetic field. They can manipulate lights, fluttering lights, and things like that. That's electricity. Those are electrons. If you could see a ghost in any way, shape, or form, even semi-transparently, that's photons. If you can hear ghostly noises, that's bosons. So these are atomic particles, right? And these spirits are generating them and or reflecting them. They have to be composed of a kind of matter in order to do that. So your body's got to be composed of a kind of matter. So when you die, even your flesh, God is going to take that and resurrect it from the dead. But if it was burned up, then he'll grab whatever body you do have left and he'll remake it um, eventually when the resurrection of the dead happens in the future. If you're not a believer, this is where it gets into gray area because I personally believe that there is a place called purgatory. Well, the Catholics call it purgatory. They refer to purgatory as a place that you can go to work your salvation, like all the things that you did bad in life, you go there to kind of work through it until you're finally good enough that you get to go be with God. That's not really biblical. Jesus died for our sins and he paid the price on the cross, according to the Bible. So when you die, you go to heaven. He paid the price, not you. And you're not going to pay for more of something than the cross did by being punished in purgatory, right? So, however, I do think there is a purgatory because there's a lot of evidence of it. People dying, going down there, experiencing it. People who astral project have been to a place called purgatory. There's a guy, Robert Monroe, and he founded the Monroe Institute, and they did all this astral projection stuff. Pretty fascinating. But I learned a lot about the underworld and stuff from his book, and then cross-referencing that with the Bible. And apparently there's like layers to the underworld, which is like layers of hell, I think. Uh, and even this guy, atheist as he was, talked about being there in a place called Locale One. And there would be beings there, people there, some of them dead, others they're like dreaming or whatever, and then they don't remember, but they go down there and their thoughts and stuff are formulating their environment. So it's the environment in that place is like a dream-like environment. It's very malleable to whatever your thoughts and your consciousness are. So the content of your dreams, uh, some even argue that that realm and your dream realm are one and the same, right? Um, and so lucid dreaming is connected with astral projection and stuff like that because of that. But when he was down there, fully conscious, astral projecting out of his body, he would hear this trumpet blast, and all of the beings that were there would lay prostrate on the ground facing up and not allowed to turn their head and look. And they would hear this rumbling going through the underworld. And it was some sort of like, what do you call it, a convoy or a caravan of some sort, some otherworldly caravan, but it had a majesty to it, like a royalty, like the announcement of that horn, hearing this horn blasting throughout all eternity. And then they would feel the vibrations and stuff of something very powerful. And this guy said this was either God or maybe God's son. But it's an atheist saying it. He was like completely agnostic when it came to God, and he even lived his life leaving his body all the time and stuff. So for him, the whole idea of God and in the Bible and stuff, I kind of don't think he knew the Bible well enough to be able to see the reality of what he was actually literally seeing and experiencing in the Bible. See, he just wasn't interested. And his concept of life after death is like, well, obviously there is life after death. Why do I even need that? But he encountered a lot of stuff. He was actually attacked by this demon dog at one point. But on this occasion, he said this thing would go through, and they weren't allowed to look at it. Nobody dared to look to see. He said it's just something like you just didn't. It's like he didn't know if he could, but he would not. It just programmed in or something. Like it just couldn't. Um, and he said that it would roll across their souls, all of these souls. It would just roll over the top of them, going through this eternal realm, and it would pick some of them out. Pick one out here, pick one out there, pick one out there. And he's like, what's it doing with them? And he talked to some of the beings there, and they're like, none of them really knew. They're like, well, I don't know. I don't know what, but we don't see them anymore. So we don't know. So my theory is that maybe there is a purgatory, but it's a place of extended grace instead of a place where you have to be good enough and then you make it to heaven, right? The typical Christian believes when you die, that's it. That's the line. It's either too late or you made your decision, well, then you're good. But if you were on the fence and you never quite, Jesus, please save me. You never, uttered that or like so clearly had a conversation with God where you put your faith in him and you died in a gray area. Maybe you sink to this place, but you're on a somewhat higher realm. It's not necessarily too unpleasant. It's an existence that matches your vibrational frequency. So maybe there's places there that are not even that bad. Um, Not what you would think of as hell. Um, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've had times in my life where I feel like I'm in hell on earth. I've
Oh,
had
yeah.
really bad times in my life, right? So in a way, this life is sort of like that, but it's not as bad as it can get. Trust me. There's places down there that are like unbelievably bad. The Bible describes places of burning torment. I can't imagine being much worse than just being set on fire and left that way. Being burned is very painful. So, um, but there are various degrees of torment in that underrealm, in that underworld, or various degrees of existence that some of them are not so bad or whatever. But maybe the beings that are there when they die, God is giving them this additional time to ponder their existence. And maybe he makes appeals to them here and there. He's still knocking and like, hey, I'm still here, Um, where are you at yet? You thought about, my offer here or, the things that I tried to show you in life that, you were on the fence um, and I think that maybe that might be happening, that purgatory is a place of extended grace beyond this life. Then there's also the possibility of multiple dimensions of us being multiple dimensional beings existing in other realities simultaneously. Um, that kind of goes with string theory, Schrodinger's cat, some weird quantum physics stuff. But the idea of a multi-reality existence uh, that kind of aligns with time travel, the idea of time travel, because mathematically time travel is possible, but then you have the grandfather paradox and all of these things. It's like, no, it can't be. You know, if you're a free will agent, you can't travel through time and then change something that is immutable because you came from that. You can't you can't undo your ability to come from that to change it, right? Um, so one way to fix it is, well, what if instead of creating other timelines, what if there just are other timelines? And every time you come to a decision point in your life, there's two versions. One where you decided this and one where you decided that. And they coexist. And there's these other realities out there. And as long as there's a version of you that's still alive in one of these other realities, and a piece of you is still alive, and a piece of you is still possibly savable. And then there's this underworld where, as you're dying in these other realities, your part of you goes to this underworld, but in your other parts of you are, in these other realities. And then at the end, eventually, all of the versions of yourself die and consolidate. And if in all of those versions you never came off the fence, sorry. But if in one of those versions of reality you did, you said, I get it. God, you're the one. I am on board with you. Then all of you that are in that underworld place, oh, let me pick you out of here, and let's reassimilate you with the rest of you. And now you're going to go off to be with the Lord. So that is one possible way to look at it. And it's a way of seeing God's grace, I think, in a wider scope than just this single life. I tend to err on the side of God's mercy. I think God is a lot more merciful than people think, um, or than most people think. But it's one of those things trying to explain quantum physics and stuff, and look at the Bible and see all these things um, and put it all together. There's Calvinism and Arminianism, where Calvinists believe in like predestination, like uh, hardline Calvinists is like, you're born for wrath. You know, God knew you were never going to repent. He knew you were never going to accept him, and he created you for wrath. You're going to go to hell. Period. Nothing you could do, which is messed up. Really, I think. I am not a Calvinist, although I I think that there's an element of truth to it that God does know what you're going to do. He does know when we're not going to accept him, but the invitation is still there. Armenianism is more like heavy on free will, but they to the point where, like, does God even know, if you're going to accept him or not? Well, the multiple dimension thing kind of reconciles all of that because God would be aware of you in all of these dimensions, and in somewhere there's a piece of you that says yes, God, and then he'll save you on all of that. So I don't know. It's some really complicated stuff, but I mean, free will versus predestination is a long-standing argument with theology, and you got people on both sides of the that spectrum that are very well-known, world-renowned scholars that can quote to you to the nth degree why they're right, and they they both can't be right, but they both are. So I yeah.
So, and where can people find you on social media, and where can they purchase your book?
Okay. So I got my own website, my author name, johnmyler.com. But I also have some of the names of my books, christianufology.net. That might be kind of easy to remember. Um, thestrongdelusion.net. That's another website. Um, aliensinthebible.com and aliensandtheantichrist.com. So all four of those domains go to my author website. And on my author website, I have my email address, jmyler@yahoo.com. And I always say this on all the podcasts, like if somebody sees my books, my content, they can't afford it, or they're on the fence, they're like, I don't know if I want to buy it, but it does look maybe kind of interesting. Go ahead and email me, man. I am still obscure enough, even after 30 years of writing and doing podcasts, I'm still obscure enough that I don't get flooded with email, So when people email me, I always answer. And I'll email you a free copy of my book. I usually like to just email a free copy of my book anyway, just because I'm like, oh, somebody heard me. Um, Here, have a copy. I only spent 30 years writing it, but But yeah, Christian Ufology is actually the second edition to Aliens and the Antichrist. So they're the same book essentially, but Christian Ufology is the later one with more information and a really condensed appendix in the end, where I have consolidated research notes. Like, um, yeah, yeah. So email me, and my websites are out there. Of course, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook, um, and YouTube. I got a YouTube channel. All that stuff's linked on my author website. I have
Oh,
a blog on there too.
John, it's been fun chatting with you. I think we went over the time limit, but that's all right.
Ah, all right, yeah. Thank you very much for having me on your show, and it's really good talking to you, man.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right. Now that wraps up today's episode. Make sure to tune in next Monday for another interview. Until then, God bless, and we'll catch you next time.
All right, thank you.